Hello and welcome to this tutorial for ReeFlex's G-Series VND filters. If you're new to the G-Series or to VND filters in general, then this video is for you. VND stands for Variable Neutral Density, and these filters allow you to control the amount of light coming into the camera by rotating them. They're made of two parts that you can rotate precisely until you achieve the look that you want. And the numbers refer to the density or strength of the filters in stops of light. A stop of light is a universal measurement of brightness. Changing by one stop refers to either making things twice as bright by letting in twice as much light, or twice as dark by letting in half as much light. And the best way to understand this is to see it in action. We're going to start with some video stuff, which is more just eyeballing the filter, turning it until I see the look that I want, and then we're going to get into some photography stuff where I precisely calculate exactly how many stops of light I need on the filter to achieve the shutter speed that I need. Videographers and filmmakers often like to follow a rule called the 180-degree shutter rule, which is where your shutter speed is double your frame rate, and a really popular combination of shutter speed and frame rate is 24 frames per second, therefore a shutter speed of a 48th of a second. And that's really popular because it gives you that cinematic look, and it gives you a cinematic look because it's used in cinemas, and we associate that frame rate and that shutter speed with the cinema, and it gives you really natural motion blur as well. But a problem that iPhone filmmakers often run into out in the field when they're trying to shoot at the 180-degree shutter rule with those settings is that things often get way overexposed because there's just too much light around to use a 48th of a second, even at the lowest ISO. But that is where, of course, the VNDs come in. You can either use them with a G-Series lens or attach them directly to your iPhone. Either way, you need a G-Series case and step-up adapter. And I've already made a 10-minute long video going into the correct practices for putting your phone in a G-Series case and using the adapters and things like that. So if you're just getting started, that video will be linked below. I highly recommend you watch it. So I'm going to skip that part and focus just on the VND specific stuff. So take your filter and magnetically attach it to the adapter. And while this is magnetically stuck on, it can still fall off. It's not secure because it can move around. So just make doubly sure that your filter can't slide around on the adapter. Now, the entire filter itself, both parts, both the black and the green ring, can rotate once it's on the adapter. But doing this is just going to scratch everything. It's just going to scratch the front of the adapter and the back of the filter. Plus, it isn't going to have any effect on your exposure either. So try not to do that. Instead, just hold the black ring in place and then slowly rotate the green one to adjust your exposure. So here I was able to use the 1.5 to 5 stop VND to achieve the 180-degree shutter rule with my video, and if I need more or less light coming in, the beauty of the VND is I can instantly adjust it just by rotating it precisely the amount that I need. So that is video. Now let's move on to photography, and this can be a lot more technical, especially at first, but it's just maths. It's just primarily doubling and halving of numbers, which if I can do, then you could definitely do it, because I'm awful at maths, so don't worry. Let's have a look. One of the most popular reasons that photographers invest in VND filters is for long exposures, typically of waterfalls in the middle of the day, just like now. But these types of photos involve slow shutter speeds, usually of around 1 second or more. And when you're at those sorts of shutter speeds, you're just letting too much light in. So photographers use VNDs to block out precisely the amount of light that they need to for their daytime long exposure, as I shall now demonstrate. So I'm in the ReeFlex Pro camera app, got my manual settings, and I want to take a long exposure of this waterfall. But the problem is, at this time of day, the correct settings for a decent exposure are about what you see on the screen. I've got ISO 59, 200th of a second. I'm focused on the waterfall. I'm going to lock the white balance. Got a timer on as well, so I can avoid some camera shake when I do slow the shutter speed down. Let's have a look at the exposure and what the motion of the water looks like. I'm going to come into dark room because I am shooting in RAW, and The exposure looks nice, but you can see the water is frozen. So we need to use a slow shutter speed and really smoothing that water out. Well, we'll watch what happens when I slow the shutter speed down to my desired 1 second, the maximum the iPhone can do. By the way, any app that lets you capture for longer than 1 second, it's merging photos together. Night mode and re-expose all do that. One single frame is the maximum, the cap is 1 second. But look at it. So that's where the VND comes in. So I'm going to set it to about 8 stops. Well, not about 8 stops, exactly 8 stops, if I can see it on the filter. And look at that result straight away. And let's just take a photo. Everything is still the way I left it. All we've done is added a filter. Haven't changed anything else. Look at that. 8 stops of neutral density. Working really, really well there. Now, a great question at this point is, what about apps like ReExpose, dedicated slow shutter apps that allow you to capture for longer than 1 second so you don't have to use one of these? Great question. Why would you bother with a VND when we have apps like ReExpose? Now, let me show you. So I'm in ReExpose, which is a dedicated long exposure camera app. And let's choose my exposure. So go lowest ISO possible and just over 200th of a second. Yeah, 1/226 should be fine. Now, these are great apps because you can capture for longer than 1 second and smooth out that motion. But sometimes you can see artifacts where the pictures have been merged together. Because that's how they work. Apps like ReExpose take many, many frames over the length of time that you choose. So if I choose 10 seconds, I'm going to capture 10 seconds worth of frames at these settings, merge them all together, do some magic, and give you your long exposure result. But in certain situations, you can still see artifacts, but the motion doesn't look perfectly smooth. You can see some roughness in it, which still is a nice photo, but it's like, it's not quite that authentic long exposure, and that's where the VND comes in. Now, I'm going to preface this example by saying this is not the perfect example. A better example is when there's lots of light around, and the light really shows up the artifacts. Here, I couldn't ask for a better situation for long exposures, which is great as a photographer without a VND, but I'm trying to do a tutorial. I'll do my best for you. I think you can still see a difference. So let's have a look. I'm going to focus. Key thing as well is to focus before you attach any sort of filter, because when you're essentially blocking out the light and it can mess with the autofocus system. So I'm going to tap to focus and I'm going to lock it in place at 0.84. Got my histogram. I'm going to set my timer so to avoid camera shake, and I think 10 seconds is a good, fair capture time. So ReExpose is now capturing all these frames and merging them together live automatically for me, and it's going to present me with one single frame. And the results look great. Look at that. Really, really nice. Right? Now let me introduce a filter. But in order to work out what filter I need, well, one, I can just eyeball it. I can put a filter on and see if it's any good, or I can actually work it out. So I'm going to work it out live in front of you. I want to be at 1 second, so I need a goal. So my goal is 1 second shutter speed. So I'm at 226 now, so it's a case of halving until I get to 1. So let me try and do it for you. Shall I make it easier for myself and start at 200? I think I'll do that. So 200, right? You then go down to 100.
Just checking your math on that. Yes. I got the same thing.
So that is 1 stop. 2 stops is 50. 3 stops is 25. 4 stops is 12. 5 stops is 6. 7 stops is 3. 8 stops is 1.5. So between 8 and 9 stops. Can you see how we got there? Okay. So make sure my focus is locked. Put it on. Now I'm going to slow the shutter speed way down to 1 second, and things are going to look amazing. So here we are, the exposure is brightening up, and I'm going to capture a photo again. Nothing else has changed. I've gone down to 1 second, and I've put my filter on. Okay, so let's have a look at the difference, and I'm not expecting it to be massive, like I said earlier. Okay, the motion looks really, really nice. It looks so beautiful. Compare it to the other one. So this first photo without the filter, it's like an 8 out of 10 in terms of the quality of the motion blur. It's great. I'm not here to tell you that it's not and say, buy a filter. You definitely need it in all situations. You don't, okay? But this motion blur, this is like 10 out of 10. This is as close to real motion blur as you're going to get, because it is real motion blur. The filter has allowed you, or has allowed me in this situation, to get 1 second, which is actually going to produce real motion blur. So I'm merging frames that contain actual real motion blur. And it's the difference here between, oh, that's a great photo, that's fantastic, and, oh my God, it's an actual real long exposure, that's amazing. But sometimes it can be the difference between, oh, I was expecting more, I can actually see the motion in the water, versus that's amazing. I love the quality and the control and the flexibility that the G-Series VND filters offer me, and I hope this video has helped you understand how to get started with them and give you some idea of the creative effects that can be achieved with them. And if you'd like some support, feel free to leave a comment, and there's also a great ReeFlex Piazza Facebook group. I'm in it, the ReeFlex founders, the manufacturers are in it as well. And also just loads, like I think a couple thousand of like-minded photographers of all levels, just sharing their work, asking questions, giving feedback. And if you need a question answered, if you'd like to share your work or just get a community vibe, maybe some inspiration, then check it out. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and if you'd like to watch another tutorial on the G-Series range of filters, then this video is part of a playlist all about the G-Series filters that you can check out. Videographers and filmmakers often like to follow a rule called the 180-degree shutter rule, which is where your frame rate, no, it's not.